In August Hazanvis, a city of 1 million people, was 13 kilometers from being erased from history. No army came to save them. No superpower stepped in. The rest of the world wasn't even watching. And if this city had fallen, the map of Europe you know today, the countries, the borders, maybe even the language you're speaking right now, might not exist. This isn't World War II. It's not Stalingrad. It's not D-Day. You've probably never heard of it. It's called the Miracle on the Vistula, and it's the battle history forgot to tell you actually saved the continent. Here's the twist you need before any of this makes sense. The country we're talking about had been erased from the map for 123 years. Poland didn't exist. Not as a line on a map, not as a government, not as a flag. In Nezas and Dasapanj, its neighbors, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, carved it up between them like a meal. For over a century, Poland was a memory parents passed down to their children, not a place you could point to. Then, in 1918, World War I ended. Empires collapsed. And out of the wreckage, Poland came back. Reborn. Reassembled from nothing. It had existed again for less than 2 years when the next existential threat arrived. And this one wasn't going to carve up its territory. It was going to erase it completely and keep going. While Poland was busy being born again, something much bigger was happening next door. Russia was in the middle of a revolution. The Bolsheviks, Lenin's communists, had just seized power, and they weren't planning to stop at Russia's borders. Their goal was global. Spread the revolution west, topple the old European order, and light the fuse in Germany, where Lenin believed the real prize was waiting. Poland wasn't the target. Poland was just the road. By the summer of 1902, the Red Army was smashing through that road at a terrifying pace. City after city fell. Polish forces, barely 2 years old as a functioning military, some soldiers fighting without proper boots or rifles, were in full retreat. A Soviet commander looked at the map and made a chilling prediction. If Warsaw fell, there would be nothing left standing between the Red Army and Berlin. Nothing left standing between the Red Army and the rest of Europe. By mid-August, as on Norevis, this stopped being a war on a map far away. It became a countdown. The Red Army's forward units were spotted just 13 kilometers from Warsaw. Close enough to hear, close enough to see. European diplomats had already packed their bags. Most foreign governments assumed the city, and the war was over inside Warsaw. Churches filled with people praying for something, anything, to change the outcome. Volunteers who had never held a weapon lined up to defend the capital. Most of them assumed they'd lose. And in the middle of this collapsing situation, one man made a decision so aggressive that his own generals thought it might be insane. His name was Józef Piłsudski. And instead of trying to survive the coming attack, he decided to gamble everything on making one of his own. Piłsudski's plan sounds simple when you say it out loud. It was anything but. Instead of throwing every soldier into defending Warsaw directly, he peeled off roughly a quarter of his available forces, troops he desperately needed on the front line, and marched them south, out of sight, out of contact, into position along the Vips River. The idea: let the Red Army keep pushing toward Warsaw, let them commit fully to the attack, and then hit them from the side they weren't watching. A knife in the flank of an army that thought it had already won. If Polish intelligence had misread the Soviet positions, if the Red Army noticed the maneuver even a day early, this wasn't a battle plan anymore. It was a plan to hand Warsaw over on a silver platter with the country's last reserves marching in the wrong direction. There was one more detail working in Poland's favor. one the Soviets never saw coming. Poland had broken the Red Army's codes. Polish cryptographers had been intercepting and decoding Soviet radio communications for weeks, reading troop movements, reading orders, reading the enemy's own plan almost as fast as Soviet commanders themselves. This is the part of the story that rarely makes it into the headlines. The miracle people would later credit to prayer and providence had a very unglamorous, very human explanation sitting quietly underneath it. Intelligence work, codebreakers in a back room, doing invisible work that let Polish commanders see the battlefield the enemy thought was hidden. Combat intelligence with Piłsudski's hidden southern strike force, and Warsaw wasn't a desperate last stand. Everyone on the outside assumed it was a trap, and on August 16th, Sazon Viz, it was sprung. The Red Army hit Warsaw's defenses expecting a city on the verge of collapse. What they got was days of brutal, grinding combat, the town of Radzymin changing hands over and over. Polish lines bending but refusing to fully break, buying just enough time for the trap to close. Then Piłsudski's hidden force struck from the south, smashing into the exposed flank and rear of the Soviet armies, the one place they had left completely unguarded because they never imagined an attack from that direction. The Red Army's advance didn't just stall, it disintegrated. Soviet forces that had been racing toward victory just days earlier were suddenly running, retreating in disorder, harassed the entire way back toward the Niemen River. A French military advisor watching the collapse of the Soviet offensive wrote just one line home that captured the whole reversal. Our Poles have grown wings. In roughly 2 weeks, the war had completely flipped. Here's why this battle deserves to be remembered as more than a footnote in Polish history. Lenin's plan wasn't defeat Poland and stop. Poland was the corridor. Germany, bruised, unstable, economically devastated after World War I, was considered fertile ground for the next communist revolution. Beyond that, France. Beyond that, the rest of Western Europe. If Warsaw had fallen in August Tazenivis, there was no clear line of defense left between the Red Army and the heart of the continent. Historians and military analysts have argued for a century about how far that wave would have gone. Some call it one of the most decisive, world-altering battles of the entire 20th century, on the same level as history's other great turning points, and almost nobody outside Poland has heard of it. So why isn't the miracle on the Vistula sitting next to Stalingrad and D-Day in the history books? Timing is brutal. This battle happened in Ezazansteviz, a battle against communism won by a country that, less than 20 years later, would be crushed between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union in World War II, and spent the next 50 years trapped behind the Iron Curtain, ruled by the very ideology it had once stopped at the gates of Warsaw. You don't get to control your own stories when you don't control your own country. For decades, Soviet-era history simply didn't have room for a story about the Red Army being humiliated by a smaller, poorer, newly reborn nation. The victors get remembered. The forgotten don't get erased by accident. They get erased because someone benefits from the silence. Poland's own national anthem carries a line that could double as the epitaph for this entire story. The nation is not lost so long as we still live. In August Atinevis, a country that had been wiped off the map for over a century, rebuilt from nothing, fighting with soldiers who didn't even have proper boots, stopped an empire not with a miracle. With intelligence, nerve, and one commander willing to bet everything on a plan his own side thought was reckless. Next time someone tells you history's biggest turning points are all the ones you already know, remember the battle fought 13 kilometers from a city that shouldn't have survived. And if this is the first time you're hearing this story, you're not alone. That's exactly the point.